after the huge success of this World Cup, where is Brian? Brian, listen to this. After the huge success of this World Cup, you know, and you're right, post-World Cup depression, we cannot let this happen, right? So, some time ago there was a discussion about World Cup every 2 years. Maybe we should have 2 World Cups here, actually, and celebrate the world coming together all the time. Let's think about that.
Something big has just blown up inside FIFA, and this goes way beyond what happens on a football pitch. FIFA President Gianni Infantino is facing serious criticism after a controversial proposal to sell a stake connected to the World Cup reportedly fell apart. Now, some critics are even calling for him to resign. But the real reason this story matters has less to do with football and more to do with money, influence, and who gets to control some of the biggest institutions on the planet. On the surface, this looks like another sports controversy. Dig a little deeper though, and it becomes a story about powerful people making massive decisions behind closed doors while everyone else watches from the sidelines.
If anybody has got any problem against anybody, whether it's Gianni, whether it's anybody else, follow the process, follow the FIFA process, and if you want to take him out, go for elections. It's simple as that. Let the 211 member associations decide.
That makes FIFA a pretty useful window into how modern institutions can operate when huge amounts of cash, political influence, and global prestige all collide. So how did we get here? It starts with the man critics now accused of trying to turn football's biggest tournament into an even bigger business machine. And full disclosure, I am not exactly a football expert. For me, a centre-back sounds more like the part of my body that complains after I get out of bed too quickly. Thankfully, you don't need to know every formation or transfer rumour to understand what's going on here.
Everybody has a right to be heard. And let's have a hearing and a proper forum, a proceeding, a court, or whatever it is, or a tribunal, and let's respect everybody's entitled to fair judgment, to fair treatment. Everybody should be heard. Out the part of that, let everybody be heard.
As this story unfolds, the picture gets much wider than FIFA. But first, we need to look at what was essentially a giant business proposal. Go back to late July. The United States had just finished hosting a major FIFA tournament that generated enormous commercial attention, setting the stage for an even more ambitious money play. Gianni Infantino was riding about as high as a FIFA president possibly could. But, like a bald Icarus, he was about to drift dangerously close to the sun, except this particular sun came in the form of a Kushner-linked investment firm. On July 28, Infantino unveiled a major new investment proposal known as FFE, or FIFA Forward Enterprise. The pitch sounded pretty straightforward on paper. FIFA wanted to package much of its commercial and event operation machine into one giant vehicle. We're talking sponsorships, licensing, tournament operations, ticketing, hospitality, and broadcasting, basically the parts of football that generate serious cash. FIFA would keep control of FFE while allowing outside private investors to buy as much as a 20% stake. If everything went according to plan, the deal could raise around $4.2 billion based on a roughly $20 billion valuation. And this is where the names involved started getting attention.
Or do you apologise to fans who feel ripped off and priced out, and will you look to ensure that prices do come down and never as high again?
Well, let me say one thing as well at the outset. Let me congratulate Mayor Mamdani from New York. I was with him day before yesterday, actually. I have to congratulate him because he put on sale 1,000 tickets at $50 a couple of months ago, and since then he gets fantastic news. We put on sale 130,000 tickets at $60, and we don't get great news.
The lead investor was reportedly set to be Thrive Eternal, a firm owned by Joshua Kushner, the brother of Jared Kushner, President Donald Trump's son-in-law. Advisors and executives connected to the proposal included Disney CEO Bob Iger and former Liberty Media boss Greg Maffei. FIFA was also careful about how it framed the whole thing. The organization insisted it was not literally selling the World Cup. private investors, according to the proposal, wouldn't control sporting regulations, while FIFA would maintain control over 80% of the board. The argument was that billions raised through the deal could then be pumped back into developing football, or soccer depending on where you're watching, across the world. On paper, FIFA still held the wheel, but the involvement of private capital was about to make the whole setup far more controversial. On paper, FIFA could make this sound pretty reasonable. Once people started looking at what the deal could mean in practice though, the mood changed fast. The proposal triggered immediate backlash, with critics arguing that bringing private investors into the setup risked pushing the World Cup even further toward becoming a profit-driven commercial product rather than a tournament FIFA was supposed to protect. Then came the slippery slope argument. Sure, outside investors wouldn't initially have institutional control over FIFA's board or sporting rules, but critics questioned how long that wall would really hold once billions of dollars and investor expectations entered the picture. They thought the odds of those boundaries never moving were about as good as finally understanding the offside rule after someone explains it for the 10th time. Other critics went even deeper, arguing that FIFA and Infantino had no right to treat the World Cup like an asset that could simply be packaged up and partially sold.
The plan to sell off the World Cup to investors really just cements the feeling that he's not leading the organisation in the right direction and therefore not taking the game on the right path.
Their point was that FIFA doesn't own the tournament in the same way a businessman owns a private company. FIFA is supposed to act as its steward. And that's where this gets messy. FIFA isn't supposed to operate like a normal corporation chasing bigger returns for shareholders. It's a non-profit organization that already generates huge amounts of money, with its stated purpose centered around governing and developing football. Creating value for private shareholders isn't supposed to be the main game. The way the proposal was reportedly presented only made the backlash worse. Major football confederations said they had been blindsided, claiming they were given little time to properly examine a deal involving billions of dollars. Instead, the proposal was reportedly presented more like a take-it-or-leave-it package, with member associations facing a mid-September deadline to get on board. But there was another detail that made this deal look even more explosive. The associations were reportedly being offered huge funding increases if they backed the proposal, and those increases could disappear if they didn't sign up before the deadline. In Infantino's own open letter, after promising a $10 billion development package, he told them, "In exchange, all that is required is your continued trust." Critics immediately questioned what that trust was really buying. Under the proposal, associations that got on board could reportedly receive $40 million, while those that stayed out would receive only $10 million. That massive gap raised obvious concerns about whether members were being encouraged to support the deal with financial incentives, rather than being given enough time to judge it purely on its merits. Then there was the ticking clock. The short discussion window struck critics as a pressure tactic, almost like a slick salesman telling you the deal disappears the second you walk out the door. Sign now and potentially secure tens of millions more. Hesitate, ask too many questions, or refuse to play ball, and that extra funding could vanish.
Infantino has to go, and you need a new president. And I think you can get a president who is better than Gianni Infantino, because you just need a president who, when someone says to him, President, do you think it's a good idea for Cristiano Ronaldo to play in the first 2 games of the World Cup when he's banned? You need the president to go, no, that's not going to happen.
Whatever Infantino expected from that strategy, the reaction quickly became ugly. Major football bodies pushed back hard. UEFA, representing European football, the AFC in Asia, and CONCACAF in North America were among those reported to have serious concerns. Critics within the football establishment accused Infantino of deception and described the episode as a fundamental breach of trust, turning what was supposed to be a massive investment opportunity into a growing fight over how FIFA itself was being run. Then the situation got even more serious. There was talk of European countries potentially boycotting the next World Cup altogether, which could mean some of the biggest football nations on earth simply wouldn't show up. At that point, the tournament's commercial value would take a massive hit. Without UEFA teams involved, the product FIFA was pitching to private investors suddenly looked a whole lot less attractive. That gave UEFA serious leverage. and the proposal quickly fell apart. Within just 3 days, Infantino withdrew the FFE plan. But if this was simply a story about the FIFA president making a spectacular political miscalculation, it probably wouldn't deserve this much attention. The bigger story is what the episode can tell us about power, money, influence, and the way major institutions protect their interests. And when you're talking about allegations of corruption in global sport, FIFA comes with some serious historical baggage. The organization had major problems long before Infantino took charge. For decades, FIFA officials and its wider football network faced investigations, scandals, and accusations that made the organization practically synonymous with backroom dealing in the eyes of many critics. That reputation exploded into public view in 2015. A major US investigation alleged a 24-year corruption scheme involving football officials and more than $150 million in bribes and kickbacks, allegedly paid in exchange for favorable decisions and commercial rights. The scandal resulted in numerous criminal cases and shook international football from top to bottom. Then there were the World Cup hosting decisions.
Well, I said it some time ago. I would organize the next 10 World Cups all here in Qatar if it was down to me, because it was just such a wonderful experience for everyone. But
certain selections attracted intense scrutiny because critics questioned how particular countries had managed to secure hosting rights despite major concerns about their suitability. With voting processes often criticized for lacking transparency, suspicions surrounding FIFA weren't exactly coming out of nowhere. Qatar hosting the 2022 World Cup remains one of the most controversial examples, while Russia hosting in 2018 also attracted heavy criticism. Both decisions became wrapped in arguments about money, politics, human rights, and whether countries with enormous financial and geopolitical influence were getting special treatment. Critics have long questioned how much those factors mattered behind closed doors. By 2016, FIFA's credibility had already taken a beating. Then, Gianni Infantino arrived, running for president as the reform candidate who would supposedly clean up the organization, restore its integrity, and drag FIFA away from the scandals of the previous era. To many people, he looked like the guy who might finally fix the place. To others, he was simply the newest face on the same broken carousel. His critics soon argued that the problem had changed rather than disappeared. Old-school FIFA corruption was associated with allegations of bribes, kickbacks, and secret backroom deals that personally enriched officials while damaging trust in the game. Under Infantino, critics increasingly focused on something different: the aggressive commercialization of FIFA and the concentration of power around its leadership. One early controversy came in 2017, barely a year into his presidency, when FIFA replaced the heads of its ethics bodies, Cornel Borbeli and Hans-Joachim Eckert. They were reportedly overseeing hundreds of ongoing cases at the time. Their removal sparked a serious backlash, with critics warning that FIFA's promised reform era was already being gutted from the inside. Then came another familiar-looking fight. In 2018, Infantino pursued a controversial proposal involving roughly $25 billion in outside investment, reportedly backed by a consortium involving SoftBank that would reshape major FIFA competitions. The negotiations were criticized for their secrecy, and the proposal eventually ran into fierce resistance, particularly from UEFA. Sound familiar? At the same time, Infantino was becoming increasingly skilled at building relationships with powerful figures, both inside FIFA and far beyond the world of football. Those connections would become a major part of his presidency, and would raise even bigger questions about where sport ended and global politics began. FIFA has 211 member associations, and here's where its voting system gets interesting. Football giants like Argentina get one vote, but so do tiny associations like San Marino. On paper, that's remarkably democratic. Under Infantino, though, FIFA also dramatically increased the amount of development money distributed to member associations, something he has framed as democratizing football, and there is a fair argument for that policy. Smaller associations and poorer countries genuinely need investment, and FIFA funding has helped build facilities and develop the game in places that don't have mountains of cash. Politically, however, critics say those payments can also give FIFA's president serious leverage. If your association depends heavily on FIFA funding to survive and grow, picking a fight with the person sitting at the top isn't exactly an easy move. Then came another hosting controversy. FIFA created an unusual arrangement for the 2030 World Cup, with matches spread across Morocco, Portugal, and Spain, alongside centenary matches in Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Because of FIFA's continental rotation rules, that left associations from Asia and Oceania eligible for the 2034 tournament. Saudi Arabia ultimately became the only bidder and secured the hosting rights. FIFA has defended its bidding process as thorough, but critics argue that the timetable and structure effectively cleared the road for Saudi Arabia, raising fresh questions about just how competitive the process really was. Meanwhile, Infantino wasn't only building relationships inside football. He was increasingly rubbing shoulders with some of the world's most powerful political and business figures. And that's where Donald Trump enters the picture. Trump and Infantino have developed a visibly warm relationship, appearing together repeatedly as the United States prepared for major FIFA tournaments. That friendship might work perfectly well for them personally, but critics worry about what happens when football leadership becomes closely intertwined with political power. Trump has increasingly treated major sporting events as another stage for American prestige and influence, putting FIFA's relationship with Washington under an even brighter spotlight. The relationship became even more controversial in 2025, when FIFA created a brand new Peace Prize and awarded its first edition to Trump. Critics immediately questioned the timing and the selection process, especially given Trump's very public frustration over not receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. It wasn't clear who else, if anyone, had seriously been considered, leaving people wondering what this new award was actually supposed to represent. Then came the 2025 Club World Cup. Infantino was photographed presenting Trump with a replica of the tournament trophy, and Trump later remained on stage alongside the eventual winners during the presentation ceremony. It was another moment where the line between FIFA spectacle and presidential politics started looking unusually thin. By the 2026 World Cup, that tension had become even harder to ignore. Iran qualified for the tournament, but 15 members of its football federation were reportedly denied US visas. The Iranian national team consequently based itself in Mexico, highlighting a basic problem with hosting a global tournament across countries with very different immigration and security policies. Somali referee Omar Abdulkadir Artan became another flashpoint. FIFA had selected him among Africa's leading referees for World Cup duty, and despite reportedly holding a valid visa, he was refused entry at the US border on security grounds. FIFA's position was that immigration decisions belonged to the US government and were outside the organization's control. Critics weren't exactly satisfied with that answer. They argued that FIFA would likely apply far more pressure if a future host country blocked players, officials, or referees from entering for one of its tournaments. And then, the relationship faced an even more explosive test. After US striker Folarin Balogun received a controversial red card, reports claimed Trump personally contacted Infantino regarding the automatic one-match suspension. If political pressure played any role in a disciplinary decision, that would raise obvious questions about FIFA's independence, making the relationship between the two presidents much more than a collection of friendly photo opportunities. Infantino acknowledged that the call with Trump happened, but said he did not interfere with FIFA's disciplinary process. The suspension was ultimately put on hold before the United States faced Belgium, a decision that critics naturally viewed with suspicion given the timing. It didn't exactly save the Americans anyway, because the US went on to lose that match 4-1. That context matters because Infantino's FFE proposal wasn't being pitched to some completely disconnected group of investors. One of the key investors was reportedly a firm run by Joshua Kushner, Jared Kushner's brother. If FIFA's commercial operation became dramatically more valuable through new tournaments, expanded competitions, or fresh ways of monetizing football, outside shareholders could potentially stand to benefit enormously. Does the Kushner connection prove that the proposal was designed to enrich people close to Trump? No. But given Infantino's relationship with Trump and FIFA's growing links with political power, Critics were always going to ask uncomfortable questions about conflicts of interest and who stood to gain from the arrangement. And that's where this stops being just a football story. FIFA loves presenting the World Cup as a global event capable of rising above politics. The 2026 tournament, however, showed how difficult that promise becomes when the host government controls borders, visas, security decisions, and access to the country itself. Under Infantino, critics argue that World Cups have increasingly become places where political power, staggering amounts of money, and FIFA's institutional interests crash into each other. That creates a much bigger question. When one leader gains extraordinary access to presidents, billionaires, and governments, where does relationship building end and improper influence begin? Critics say Infantino has also centralized significant power around his presidency. They point to weakened internal checks, battles with ethics officials, growing financial dependence among smaller associations, and his close relationships with global elites. Supporters would argue that increased development funding and stronger political connections can benefit world football, but the concentration of influence still creates obvious governance concerns. With fewer effective guardrails, FIFA's leadership can pursue massive decisions involving an institution that controls a cultural event treasured by billions of people. That's why the FFE controversy hit such a nerve. Old FIFA scandals were infamous for allegations involving millions of dollars. The scale of the money and power now surrounding FIFA is potentially far larger. The scale surrounding Infantino's FIFA isn't measured in loose millions anymore. We're talking numbers big enough to resemble the economic output of entire countries. But here's the important part. Infantino couldn't simply wake up one morning and legally do whatever he wanted. At least on paper, FIFA's old machinery still exists. There are statutes, ethics procedures, councils, votes, committees, and supposedly independent bodies designed to keep the organization in check. FIFA also sits above a sprawling network of confederations and national associations involving thousands of officials, all operating under governance rules they're supposed to follow. The FFE proposal itself shows how that system still matters. Infantino needed majority support from FIFA's members to push the project forward. Critics therefore focused heavily on the proposed funding increases, with supportive associations potentially receiving around $40 million. Even if FIFA viewed that money as development funding, opponents saw the structure as a powerful financial incentive attached to an extremely important vote. But again, the bigger argument here isn't really about football. FIFA is simply an unusually clear example of a wider problem. What happens when enormous wealth, political connections, private capital, and institutional power become tangled together? The concern isn't that every relationship or business deal automatically equals corruption. That would be too easy. It's that powerful institutions can gradually reach a point where behavior that once would have caused a massive scandal starts happening openly, dressed up as networking, investment, reform, or simply how business gets done. And this isn't exclusively about Trump, Infantino, or any single political leader. The broader issue is the concentration of money and influence around small groups of people who can move comfortably between governments, corporations, investment firms, and supposedly independent institutions. Maybe the comparison only goes so far, but there's an uncomfortable parallel here. Critics argue that Infantino's consolidation of influence inside FIFA resembles the playbook used by some modern authoritarian leaders. Don't necessarily destroy every institution outright. Keep the councils, elections, committees, and formal rules in place, while gradually making those checks less capable of challenging the person sitting at the top. The playbook critics describe is pretty familiar. Remove or sideline people capable of independently investigating you, weaken the guardrails, reward loyal allies with powerful positions, and concentrate more authority around one leader while leaving the official checks and balances standing on paper. Critics have drawn versions of that comparison to political leaders ranging from Viktor Orban to Donald Trump, although the circumstances and institutions involved are obviously very different. But that doesn't mean the only response is to throw your hands up and assume powerful people always win. Infantino's FFE proposal collapsed precisely because, according to this account, he pushed too far and ran straight into resistance from some of football's most powerful confederations. That resistance could create problems far beyond one failed investment proposal. Infantino's leadership has come under heavier scrutiny, while tensions between FIFA, UEFA, and other major football bodies have raised questions about how secure FIFA's dominance over the global game really is. If powerful confederations ever seriously pursued rival competitions or structures, the fight could get messy very quickly. The comparison with politics only goes so far, but there's a useful point buried inside it. Even leaders who accumulate enormous influence can eventually discover that the institutions around them still contain people capable of saying no. Infantino may have spent years strengthening his position, but the FFE backlash showed that he wasn't untouchable. Where this goes next remains uncertain. As of August 11, Asian, North American, and European football bodies were reportedly escalating their criticism, with allegations of deception, demands for greater scrutiny, calls for an independent investigation, and even demands for Infantino to resign. Some reporting has also focused on allegations involving his private life, though those claims should be treated separately from the governance questions unless independently established. Then there's the looming FIFA election. Infantino faces re-election in March 2027 at the 77th FIFA Congress. Before the FFE controversy, his position appeared extremely strong. Now, according to critics, the political ground beneath him looks considerably shakier, and Trump has entered the argument too, publicly throwing his support behind Infantino and stating, FIFA would be making a terrible mistake if, for any reason, they even considered replacing Gianni Infantino. He is fantastic, having just presided over the most successful World Cup by 4 times ever presented. If he is gone, it will never be as successful or profitable again." End quote. That endorsement only added another political layer to an already messy situation, especially given how willing the Trump administration has been to publicly weigh in on political contests and leadership disputes far beyond America's borders, from Hungary and Brazil to the strange world of FIFA politics. The key point is that Infantino hasn't been beaten, at least not yet. CONMEBOL, representing South America, and CAF, representing Africa, have remained broadly supportive of his leadership despite the controversy surrounding him. After the FFE proposal collapsed, Infantino reportedly summoned senior FIFA officials to Morocco for what critics characterized as a bizarre loyalty test. According to that account, his internal support held firm. That shows just how difficult removing him could be. UEFA and other opponents may be powerful, but FIFA's one association, one vote structure means support across Africa, South America, Asia, and smaller football nations can matter enormously. This isn't simply a battle between Infantino and a few angry European executives. It's a fight over the political machinery controlling global football. And the ridiculous part is that most fans never asked for any of this. They want to watch the match, support their club or country, and maybe dream about reaching a final without spending absurd amounts of money, while another layer of investors looks for a bigger return. That frustration isn't unique to football either. Similar anger appears whenever ordinary people believe something they value is being reshaped primarily for wealthy investors or political insiders, whether that's controversial luxury developments in Albania or British water companies facing criticism over executive pay and sewage pollution. Different industries, different circumstances, but the same public frustration keeps surfacing. People feel like everyday life gets more expensive and less accessible, while those already sitting at the top discover increasingly creative ways to squeeze even more money out of the system. Infantino's FFE pitch may have been one of the more outrageous examples, but he's hardly the only powerful figure accused of pushing an institution toward bigger profits and deeper connections with private money. And football fans certainly aren't the only people who feel like they're being asked to pay more, while wealthy investors search for the next opportunity to cash in. What makes this case different is just how far Infantino appears to have pushed it. The FFE proposal triggered resistance from some of the biggest forces in world football, and what looked like another major expansion of FIFA's commercial machine instead became a serious test of Infantino's power. Whether it actually brings him down is another question entirely. And if the deal really is dead, the investors involved aren't exactly going to disappear. They'll move their money somewhere else, find another opportunity, and chase the next shiny thing, promising massive returns. Thanks for watching Matchio. If you enjoyed the video, hit like, share it with someone who follows football, politics, or the crazy money behind modern sport, and subscribe to Matchio for more stories digging into what really happens away from the pitch. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.